Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today is Friday, the 4th day of May, 2018. The year is just breezing right on by, and I trust that you're having a good year so far. For those of you who have had challenges, who have had incidents, who have lost loved ones, we extend our sympathies to you and just encourage you to stay strong and stay firm as a family unit. This is when you need all of your families to support you. You need everyone to put a circle around you, shield you, encourage you, support you as well. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and, by extension, For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. For the Record is a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I'm your host, Orit Connor, and you're welcome to join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open. There's always someone there waiting to take your calls. This morning, it is the radio voice of Mr. Paul Akai. You can call us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flow. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, you can email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. And you're now hearing the ads on the radio as well. We have our WhatsApp number, that WhatsApp number 925-3261, where you can leave us a voice note or send us a text message as well. If you leave a voice note, that will be played during the course of the show. A text message, we will read the contents or paraphrase the contents of that message as well. Today, being Friday, it is the day that has been assigned to the official opposition, and it is my pleasure to have in the studio with me again this morning, Mr. Christopher Saunders. Chris, is getting like the old days now. It's almost like an everyday thing. This is about, what, three times in the last 3 weeks?
Actually,
yes,
if all goes well, it'll be like the real old days. I have, this week we had PSC this week, and also we had the whole issue of the beneficial ownership issue.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I can say, if there's one person that I enjoyed being on the show with, as I said 2 weeks ago when I was here, was Dr. Steve Macfield.
Yes.
And one of the things that people sometimes forget, I mean, I like accounting, but my passion is always history and political science, and Dr. Steve had the same passion also. And many times we would reach out and we would call people like him for advice and guidance and so forth on a lot of issues, because he's very knowledgeable. And, this, as I was preparing for the show last night, I reached out to Dr. Steve and I said, with all the issues that are going on, I think it would be great if you could join me this morning on the show. When I look at the Bible verse, I think it's somewhere in Hosea, where it says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." When you go back and you look at the answers now, and you look at many of the issues, if we are brutally honest with ourselves, we have had people over many decades that have warned us about what was coming. I mean, I can tell you look at stuff even like Gilbert McLean. I can tell you, I went back, last election. I mean, Gilbert was a good friend of mine, but a competitor. And like with anything, when you're doing competitor research, you look into this, okay, where can you find maybe a weakness in an argument that would have been made? And when you look at the amount of times that people like Gilbert, people like Steve, that have been on the right side of history, and our people just refuse to listen to them. And many of the problems that we have today could have been avoided had we taken the time to listen to a lot of different people that had different views, that had a worldview. I could see things coming. And to some extent, we are paying the price of that now. We have forgotten a lot of the people who have built this place when it was basically nothing. For the guy who's the sweet-talking guy who just came out of the plane yesterday with a little briefcase and everything else. And we have completely forgotten that. And, I reached out to Dr. Steve and I said, right now, with so many things going on, it would be great if I can have you back on the show and kind of give people a lot of the knowledge that he has. Because one of my biggest fear is that when a person like Dr. Steve leaves, I don't see the next person on the horizon to replace what it is that he's doing. Last night, Alva and I was having a long talk, and we had put it in our own chat group. You look at this constitutional issue now with the UK, and our local resident constitutional lawyer. I mean, Steve is by nature a constitutional lawyer. A lot of people, I think, because he has spent more time on the criminal side, forgets that he is a constitutional lawyer. And I think an issue like this, it would be great, and we'll be pushing the government to say, you know what, with this constitutional issue we're going down, I think Dr. Steve would be an ideal person to add to the arsenal. Because one of the things, OC, this week we're going through the government use of consultants and temporary staff. And in the last 5 years, the government spent $34.5 million on consultants. And one of the things that I guess the committee was concerned about is when you bring in consultants, they come in, but they also learn from what they're doing from you. And then the question is, where does the knowledge transfer take place? Are our technocrats benefiting? Because if we allow them to come in and do what we want the civil servants to do and then they leave, where does the knowledge? I'm not saying it doesn't happen. When you look at the United States and the rise of China, one of the things that many people have agreed on now is that when the United States was sending a lot of work to China to be done in the factory, research and development take place in two areas. One, in the lab, when someone is coming up with an idea, but also on the factory floor. Because as you're now making something that was in theory before, and you're putting it into practical terms, there are things that you pick up on the factory floor that you wouldn't have picked up in a lab, So as you're doing it, something has clicked to you, And I think one of the things, especially with this issue that we have with the UK now, and we're getting ready now to really go to task, because at the end of the day, we can't have a situation or be seen to create a situation where every single time we have an issue with the UK, the message is that, you can just go legislate to us. And while I agree with the efforts that the Premier is taking and his government is taking in defending our financial service industry in this regard, what I am worried about is at this pivotal moment in our history, we have external consultants, people with a lot of knowledge or people would have known what would have gone on. But this is a time now for us to have one of our own there at the table. So a year from now, and I expect us to be successful because I'm an optimist. We can have Dr. Steve say, well, we bought them in this corner and they came with this argument, we came with that. We need to make sure we don't lose that. And that's one of the things that, Dr. Steve's bring to the table. And that's one of the reasons when I sat back and I said, to Steve, I would really like for you to come join me this morning because you bring the debate at such a level. You can go back, and I see one of the things that people miss, if you understand jurisprudence itself, especially American jurisprudence, they'll tell you the three things you need in the commission of a crime is means, motive, and opportunity. But motive is always the most difficult thing.
Yep.
And when Steve brings something and he brings the historical understanding, you kind of generate the motive. If I told you that I was surprised that this was happening, no. A decade ago, the fertility rate in Europe was about 1.48. well below the 2.1 ratio that you need to maintain a population. They literally have built a massive welfare system. They do not have the tax base to sustain it. And their first approach was, let's flood the place with immigrants. And they started bringing all these people from Eastern Europe, open to extend their tax base. And what they ended up extending was people on their own welfare state.
Yes.
So now it's hard to even get even a doctor's appointment. You know what I mean? The Americans did the same thing too, because if you look at even the U.S. fertility rate, it has climbed back up to the 2.1. But it is from basically immigration and also more from the Spanish population and, even from Asia. They went out and they corrected their issue. Europe, and as you can see, from the Brexit vote and the rise of nationalism in Europe and the Brexit vote in the UK, that those citizens are saying, no, this is not the solution. So now, how do you find the money? Because Labour has made a bunch of promises that they can get this done and this done and this done when they get the windfall of this money. And the truth of the fact, there is no money to get. There is no money. The money is still in their countries. The money never left. The paperwork is here, but the money is there. So it is when you understand the motive and the genesis of where these people are coming from with these initiatives. For them, this is survival. And you look at what happened recently, the Windrush generation and so forth. And all that has happened is that Britain has shown their racist colors in such a short period of time. You have sold out overseas territories, your former slave colonies, but you have left your crown dependencies. This just goes to show the mindset that when the push comes to shove, when the back is against the wall, they're going to do what is in their survival interests.
And the excuse that they used with that was that the movers, Mitchell and Hodge, did not know what the constitutional, or did not understand what the constitutional arrangement was between the Crown dependencies and the UK. That is the excuse that they use. But what people need to understand and recognize was that I forget his title, but one of the leaders of one of the Crown dependencies was in London at the time and lobbied strongly to ensure that the Crown dependencies were not included. That is why Alan Duncan was able, I'm not even calling him sir, Alan Duncan was able to stand up and say, we want you to remove this part about the Crown dependencies. They had someone on the ground there lobbying to ensure that they were not included in it, but they're using the excuse. And I just want to add to what you're saying is that while this is affecting or has the potential to affect the financial services industry here in the Cayman Islands, it is an existential concern that we have to have as well. And that talks about the ability of UK legislators to stay thousands of miles away and legislate, for the Cayman Islands. We have to have that resolved. This whole idea of the orders in council, we have to have that resolved. That has to become a settled issue legally as well. And if I get an opportunity, I'm going to tell people, because we want to read as much as we can on this. I tried to, learn as much as I could in relation to orders in council. And, one of our local persons here, he's not originally from here, former Attorney General in the Cayman Islands. I think he might have been the head of Cayman Finance at one point in time also. Richard Coles wrote a paper, and it's entitled, Are Orders in Council the UK's Ultimate Weapon? And if I get an opportunity, I'm going to share, part of that, with you, because this is the issue that we have to fight on, this whole issue of orders in council. The other thing that we have to look at is while we have an office in London, and we have Mr. Eric Bush over there, we shouldn't take lightly when the UK put forward suggestions to us about having our own parliamentarian in the UK Parliament. Because then you have someone there who can fight for you to a certain extent. The same way that you have the European Parliament and you have UK citizens who are members of the European Parliament, you need to have someone fighting on the ground there. I know that there's skepticism about that because it begs as to what other obligations will we have if we had someone there. But we have to take a commercial break. Let's take a commercial break, and that gives us a time,
no problem,
to focus on it after. Folks, please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly with MLA Mr. Christopher Saunders. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. It is my pleasure to have in the studio with me this morning none other than Mr. Christopher Saunders, MLA, who represents Bordentown West in our Legislative Assembly. Chris, I know you want to comment on this whole idea of having a representation in the UK Parliament. And when I say that, I mean not only just for one territory, but if, for instance, the 14 overseas territories, or even just the Caribbean and Bermuda, because they make a distinction between the Caribbean and Bermuda simply because Bermuda is outside of the Caribbean. So if we took Bermuda, Cayman Islands, Montserrat, Anguilla, Turks and Caicos, then you would at least have 6, possibly 7 there. Strength in numbers. You'd be able to sit on these committees, on some of these committees, get on those committees, know what is happening on the ground. I know you. There are fears, and I want you to express them and why you would have reservations about that.
My reservation is the old slogan: "No taxation without representation." The minute you set foot inside there and get representation.
In this case, it would be no representation without taxation.
Yeah. So, this situation, I can tell you, I can see the UK electorate is like, oh no, we're not giving these guys representation in our parliament and they're not paying no taxes. So, I mean, and that would be the natural argument, if I was a citizen of the UK. Anyone sitting in my parliament should be paying taxes. You know what I mean? And I don't think that is one of the things that, So that's just my personal belief.
And remember, we're not going to be asking them for anything financially. We just want to be there to have a say in those things that directly affect us.
The thing about it is, OC, I look back at, last week I was re-examining the Brexit vote, and I look at Wales. Wales is a net receiver of EU funds, and Wales voted to get out. You know what I mean? And it goes to show that even sometimes people built in inert prejudices outweigh their own economic views. I mean, I look at even the U.S., for example. Most of the states that benefit from Obamacare voted Republican. You know what I mean? And it's just, so you have certain prejudices. And when you look at, what has happened this last week, I can tell you, from speaking to even other people elsewhere, the fact that Britain sold us down the river and did what they did for their crown dependencies shows their true colors, whether they want to accept it or not. And this in light of what had happened with the Windrush generation, you look at what had happened in 1947. And again, this is why I say a person like Dr. Steve is ideal for these kind of discussions, is that Britain just didn't feel, let's be nice to our colonists. You're recovering from a war. You're underpopulated. You need resources. The only place you could have turned to was your colonists. So Britain at least had colonists to turn to say, come on down, guys, and help us rebuild. You look at countries like Germany and Japan, 2 countries that were soundly defeated in World War II. They didn't have any colonists. And you look at their fertility rate now. You look at their aging population. Within the next 200 years, at the rate they're going to be pretty much extinct in their own country. You know what I mean? So at least Britain opened up to their colonies, but countries that couldn't recover well didn't have any colonies to in which to say, come and help us rebuild. So this wasn't about Britain being charitable. Britain needed manpower. That's simply
precisely, yes,
to help them rebuild after the war.
Expediency.
That's all it was. You know what I mean? And then to turn around now and treat that same generation, those people, the way they wish they treated them. Like, we have gotten what we want from now, you can go. You know what I mean? And we have a call.
Go ahead. Finish
you know what I mean? So it is from that standpoint. And this document here, because I walk with this. This is the Constitution.
Yes.
Inside this document that they agreed is a certain amount of privacy that we're entitled to. I mean, you're going to turn around and tell me that the very right to privacy that I'm entitled to, you're going to throw that through the window because the Russians have bought up your properties in your country, and you don't know who it is that bought your. Come on now, man.
Let's see if we can take this call before we go to our 8 o'clock news. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning. I will see George Ebanks here.
Good morning. Good morning, George. How are you?
Good morning, my good friend from Borden Town, MLA, Mr. Chris Saunders.
Yes, my brother. Morning.
Morning. I'm a bit hoarse still. I managed to enjoy myself immensely with the deputy governor's races, but I think I left my clothes dry on me on Sunday, and at the award ceremony after the races, and I took a little cold, so my voice is a bit hoarse. But
I saw you on Facebook bragging too that I think you beat France this year.
I finally beat him up.
Congratulations.
But that's not the reason I'm calling. I'm calling in because I'm very distraught at the behavior of the United Kingdom government with the betrayal that they executed on us and all the overseas territories, really, on the night of April 26th. What this shows is that the Cayman Islands is very dispensable to the whole UK scheme of things. The UK needs Europe, especially the EU, more than the EU needs the UK. And in this dark back room of global geopolitics, Cayman was considered on the night of April 26, 2018, and we lost. We lost because these beloved Cayman Islands are nothing but a pawn in the pitiful, evil hands of our mother country, as it is now also seeking the best possible deal for itself from the EU in its Brexit negotiations. And let me say this. If the UK follows through with its expected execution of an order in council in 2020, if we don't, which I'm sure we won't, pass a law to enable public registers of our corporate affairs and our corporate registers on this island, then our financial services industry will be severely and irretrievably harmed for the benefit of the UK and its desire to extract the best possible deal for itself from the EU in its ongoing Brexit negotiations. Gentlemen, the time has come to seriously sit down and have a mature, focused, and logical debate about our constitutional advancement and possible independence. And it's about time that we acknowledge. It's about time that we acknowledge that we have the wherewithal, we have the gumption, we have the knowledge, we have the expertise, and we have qualified parliamentarians who can chart a way forward and lead us into independence where we can paddle our own canoe, for the use of a better word. The time of depending on someone to protect us has passed, and it has passed long ago, but it has now come and struck us right in the face as we deserve. Gentlemen, it is time to go and sit down and call I'm asking the Premier publicly to call a public gathering and institute some town hall meetings led by himself and others, which we have the knowledge base right here in our Parliament, to have a mature debate, a sensible debate within the town halls of these islands, including the sister island, and talk primarily on the agenda. How are we going to protect our future if we have a mother country that is primarily more concerned about its own future and not necessarily ours?
Yes. Thank you very much.
I say good morning to you all. I say good morning to the Cayman Islands, but I'm very distraught because what is happening is we are destroying, we are allowing someone who has no interest in our future to destroy the very fabric of our society and our quality of life, and we seemingly are willing to sit down and smile and say, well, we are a dependent territory and the mother country is all good and sacrosanct. Gentlemen, they are not.
Caller, thank you very much. We have to ask you to leave us there. We have our 8 o'clock news. Folks, please stay tuned. When we return, the conversation will continue with Mr. Christopher Saunders. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, MLA Mr. Christopher Saunders, and of course, you know, he represents Bordentown West in our Legislative Assembly. And it is my distinct honor and pleasure to have Back in the studio with us this morning, Dr. Steve McField. Dr. McField, good morning. Welcome back to
Good morning to you, Mr. For the Record, and good morning to Mr. Sanders, my representative from Bordentown West. You have to thank him for me being here. He called me and asked me if I would come on.
I didn't call. I begged. Oh no, I begged.
The only thing you didn't do was go on your knees, right?
Yeah, he didn't put me that. I begged him.
So when my representative begged me to come on, I have to come because he represents me.
Yes.
And I have to protect him because I look forward to him for whatever gains I have to make, for everything I have to do political. He represents me in the legislature where the lawmaking is made. He's my representative. He's my lawmaker, and I come to support him. And I will always support him as long as he is my lawmaker. And if he cease to be my lawmaker, then he's my friend.
Right.
So he plays two roles. He's my friend and he's my lawmaker. Okay. So I support my lawmaker wherever I go. I support the office. The office is the thing that you have respect for and support first.
Yep.
All those things, but things and breakfast and thing comes after. It's the office that you support. Well, he asked me to come on this morning, and I'll see if I would like to say that I didn't come here to quarterback all of the reaction of people. The reaction of people. I didn't come here to quarterback the reaction of people about this whole thing. What I really came to show us how we got here, what happened to us, why we are here, and how we got here, politically and constitutionally.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people don't know, that my real specialty in law school and stuff, I'm a constitutional administrative lawyer. One MLA, I think it was a couple of days ago, made a reference to me as being a walking encyclopedia. I'm not really a walking encyclopedia. I know a lot of history because the underpinning of my profession is history and political science.
Yep.
I did those courses to be able to have a great career in law. And in fact, I didn't intend to come back to Cayman because I intend to go on the world stage where I could use that expertise that I have. I have to work as a criminal lawyer here and things like that because I have to make a living, have to eat. But my expertise is criminal law. Some of the courses I took before I got into law school was constitutional history and the history of British institutions and the history of international institutions of United Nations institutions, and that is what I like to do. I love that. That is the best thing. And if you go abroad and you could retrace my footsteps and ask people who know me, they'll say McField was one of the best constitutional law students in the classes that I went to. Okay, so I just would like to say how we got into this mess here. And we have to go back in the history. That's the first thing we have to do. Now, a lot of students don't know. I was asking a little boy the other day, a young man the other day, if he knew anything about how we became English. And he said, no, he didn't know. But let me tell you, these islands were Spanish before they became English. In 1655, Admiral Penn and General Venables took Jamaica away from the Spaniards. They settled in Jamaica. That was Admiral Penn, and Venables was sent out by Cromwell. You remember Cromwell, who had deposed Charles I, and was the Lord Protector of England. Now, Jamaica was settled. Cromwell was settled by them, and they still have Spain. They still have Spain in the Caribbean, and England was a military might. But the pirates were something for some people that they couldn't control. They had Captain Morgan, who was one of the pirates, and then they decided to put him in the Tower of London. But then they found out that he was the only one who could control the pirates, and they had to take him out and send him back to the West Indies. And then in 1670, they decided, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to have a treaty. They call it the Treaty of Madrid, where they decide to share up the West Indies, and France get one, Spain get one part, and England got one part, and that is how Jamaica was ceded to United Kingdom, to the United Kingdom in 1670. Now we were not part of Jamaica, but we were adjacent to Jamaica. So all the islands that were adjacent to Jamaica went with England. Now, of course, you know, I call it the Pedro Rebellion in 1831, where we set up our own legislature, because there was no relationship between Jamaica and Cayman Islands constitutionally or legally. The governor of Jamaica was also the governor of the Cayman Islands, and the governor was the one who sent people down here. There was no government. He sent magistrates to carry out his duties as to administer the country. And then in 1863 to 1865, we had what we call the Caymanian Act, in the Act of Parliament. What that act did, it put the Cayman Islands directly under the rule of Jamaica. We call it a dependency situation, same as the crown dependencies now in England.
That was in 1863?
1863, but it didn't come into force until 1865 because they had to find a way to deal with all of the illegal laws that they said that the Westermen, the legislature, had done at Pedro St. James, because, you know, they would have to try them for treason because they had no right to without the king's authority. And so they compromised and said, we are going to ratify all the things they had done up until that time, and we're going to start anew. And then England decided, after all of this, to get rid of all of these countries under one government like Canada, one federal government. And then they started something called the Federation Act, 1953. There was a trial period. And of course, you know what happened to that. A lot of the people in the Federation, because we were so far apart, all the Negroes that they brought from Africa were different, from different tribes and different countries, and they couldn't agree. In between the Federation, after that, England decided to give us our first constitution in 1959. You remember the last day of the vestry was April the 3rd, 1959, and our constitution came into force in 1959 on the 4th of July. Yes, that's when you have the first responsible government constitution. It was only a responsible government constitution. People responsible for things. And then the big thing came. I said it was the big event. The big event came. The big thing came in 1962 when the Caribbean Federation split. And we had something called the West Indian Act.
West Indies Act, yeah.
The West Indian Act, 1962. It's right here in our Constitution. A lot of people don't even understand what it means or don't pay attention to it. But what the West Indian Act did was to give the Queen and Council, the Privy Council, the Queen and her ministers, her advisors, the right to legislate for the overseas countries and the Commonwealth. Now, the Privy Council is an advisory body to the monarch, and is made up of senior politicians and from both houses of Parliament. It is the oldest part of the unwritten British Constitution. It started, it started a long time ago, but it's got its permanence in 1701. It advises the Queen for carrying out her duties. For instance, her duties under Section 53 of the Constitution, here, and under Section 125. And what does our Constitution say? That the executive power rests in Her Majesty the Queen, and that power is exercised for Her Majesty the Queen through the Governor of the Cayman Islands and through the Cabinet. So really, constitutionally, we don't have any Cayman Island government of our own. That government belongs to the Queen, and the ministers only exercise her power through that. Now, what the Privy Council does, it extends legislation to the British overseas territories. It does not have power to extend legislation to the Crown dependencies. And that is what the reason why the gentleman who was moving the bill in the House of Commons said he didn't want to have any constitutional problems with it. because the House of Commons could have moved a bill, because Parliament is supreme in England and can move a bill, but Parliament does not, under the British Constitution, unwritten Constitution, have any legislative right for the calling it for the overseas territories. That has to go to the Privy Council. Okay? Now, the Privy Council also has the power to ratify legislation from Crown dependencies. It can issue proclamations, such as dates of holidays and things. It can grant royal charters. It can appoint professional bodies. And one final thing that it has is acting as a final court of appeal to the overseas countries and territories, and to all of those countries who accept the Privy Council as the final court of appeal. Because some don't. Australia and Canada and all those places don't do that anymore. Okay?
And even some in the Caribbean.
And even some in the Caribbean countries.
Trinidad, one of them.
So the powers and the Privy Council, the orders in council stems from two different limbs. Those orders in council who have to get the Queen's approval and the approval of all of the members of the Privy Council, and those orders in council who does not have to get the approval, but it can be done by ministers in the UK House of Commons. That is the order in council now, which the Parliament in England now is asking to send to the Cayman Islands, to force them into not to comply with the requests for them to have the open register.
Okay, we're going to take a commercial break, and we have one caller. So let's go to the commercial break. We will take that caller as soon as we return from the commercial break. Please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We have one caller. After that caller, and we will, if we have to respond to that caller, we will. And I'm going to also ask Dr. McPhail to explain to our listening and our viewing audience as well the fact that in the UK, and this may surprise some of you, in the UK, there are two bodies that are called the Privy Council, and I will get Dr. McPhail to explain to you the difference between the two Privy Councils as well. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning again, O.C.
Good morning, sir.
And good morning to your guest.
Good morning.
Morning.
O.C., can you allow me to just finish what I started on Monday regarding the boardwalk in Southtown?
Yeah, but I'm going to ask you to try to be as quickly as possible rather than getting into the specifics.
No, I'll make it brief.
Okay.
The last point I wanted to make regarding the boardwalk, the way the construction is done, they've made this cement pads, right? They're putting ledgers on the wall. There's no type of moisture barrier in between the boards and the concrete. In a year or two, all of those boards will be rotted out. And what are we going to have? The connections that was put in down by the piling that connects the mountain, none of those have connections. The bolts that is connecting the ledgers to the walls, there's no washers on the bolts. These are things that someone needs to go there and inspect, because what they're supposed to be, the job they're supposed to be doing, it is not being done up to standards. Thank you very much. That's all I wanted to get finished. Thank you very much, Josie.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. And again, if people aren't listening to what the caller has said, and I'm going to suggest to the caller as well that he brings that to the attention of the planning as well as the minister responsible. If it's going to be done right, properly, it needs to be done properly. We need not have repercussions later on, serious repercussions, from that as well. And while this person has admitted that, he didn't get to work on it, he's still monitoring it and given suggestions to the government in that regard. Suggestions that if somebody else called up or somebody else went to them, they would be hired as a consultant, and that would be $36 million rather than $35 million in consultancy. No, I'm only kidding. But no, he is offering advice, and someone needs to listen to him, and I hope that they are. Dr. Markfield, before you get back on track, the distinction in terms of the Queen's Privy Council and the Judicial Privy Council.
Well, the Queen's Privy Council are made up of the council who advise the Queens on her duties. For instance, of legislating for the overseas countries and territories. And let me give you an example of that. If you look at our 2009 Caribbean, this is the statutory instrument. That means that's a law.
Yes.
Okay? And it says that the Court of Buckingham Palace, 2009, so present the Queen Most Excellent Majesty and Council. That is the council that advises the Queen. And it goes on to say, Her Majesty, in exercise of the powers conferred upon her by Section 5 and 7 of the West Indies Act 1962, and of all other powers enabling her to do so, is pleased by and with the advice of her Privy Council to order, and it is orders as follows. That is the Cayman Constitution. The other Privy Council is the judicial body of the Privy Council. That is the court of law. That is the final court of appeal. That is the final court of appeal for all of the overseas territories and for all of those Commonwealth countries that has retained the appeal process to the Queen and Council, to the Privy Council.
Yes.
So
what I'm going to also ask you, Dr. Markfield, is the various sections of the British West Indies Act.
Yes.
If you can read those various sections applicable, because I know you talked about some of them, but if you could do that for us, that would be useful.
Now, let me, for Mr. For the record, has just given me the West Indies Act 1962, and here it is, the various sections. Section 1, it has the power of Her Majesty to provide for succession of colonies from and dissolution of the West Indies. Power of Her Majesty to provide for performance of functions heretofore performed by federal authorities for benefit of federated colonies. Compensation scheme for officers of federal public service. 4, power of Her Majesty to establish common courts for the West Indian colonies. That is the Grand Court, the Court of Appeal, and all of those things that we have today. 3, power of Her Majesty to provide for government of certain West Indies colonies. Just what I said this morning.
Right, exactly what you said.
This morning. Power of Her Majesty to establish new forms of government in place of the West Indies. 7, supplementary provisions as to orders in council. 8, grant for benefit of certain West Indian colonies. 9, expenses, and 10, short title interpretation and repeals. So that's her power over the West Indies. The power over the West Indies territories, over the overseas territories, the British overseas territories, is vested in Her Majesty and the Privy Council, not the United Kingdom Parliament.
Yes.
And that is why the gentleman who was moving the bill said in Parliament, I do not want to cause a constitutional crisis, conflict, because they have no right to do that. They can do it because Parliament is supreme and can do anything. But under the West Indies Act 1962, the arrangements to make laws for the peace, order, and good governance of the colonies is vested in Her Majesty and the Privy Council.
And I believe that the constitutions of the independent countries as well refers to the West Indies Act, because that is how they get their
that is how they get those.
Yes.
And the Canadian Constitution refers to the BNA Act, the British North America Act. That's how they got those.
Okay.
And so here we are today. We are reacting on a situation that has that we did not understand, because if we had read the Constitution, we would have understood that this was a possibility. Or if we read it and didn't understand it, or if we read it, we ignored it. This is a possibility that the Commons and this is the order in council that the Commons is using now. They're not using the order in council where they have to get they have to where they have to get acquiescence from the Queen. They're using the Order in Council, where a minister can draft the order and send it to Privy Council and ask them to apply it to the colonies. That's what they're doing now with this order.
Yeah. And now for a historical perspective, can we point out to our listening and viewing audience that orders in council, if it were to come about, it would not be something new for the Cayman Islands.
It's not
in
something new.
1990, I believe, abolition of the death penalty. And the other one would have been in 2000, early 2000, the sexual...
the Buggery Law.
Buggery Law, right. Right.
The Buggery Law, an Order in Council put to rest the Buggery Law and says that homosexual acts between people...
consenting adults.
Consenting adults.
In their privacy.
Was in the privacy could not be brought any criminal action against them.
Right.
And remember now, we had spent over $400,000 up and northward. The trap door was almost ready to spring. Boom! And the neck was gone. And the day before that, they passed the Order in Council and said you can't hang anybody in Cayman. And we had to abide by it.
And the reason that they had to pass that Order in Council was because their legislature refused.
Their legislature refused the death penalty in Britain.
Yeah.
And they transferred that to us.
Yeah. And then there are occasions when, if our legislature here refuses to enact legislation that they tell us to do, then they do it by orders in council as well.
If you look at our Constitution, I think it's section 53. I think it's one of those sections where it says, if you look at what it says here.
You go ahead and talk. I'll find it, and then we can come back to it.
Find the place where it says that the governor can bring legislation, can bring a bill in the legislature if the legislature refuse to bring a bill.
Yes.
If the governor asks them to bring a bill and they refuse to do so, that the governor can do so. So what the Commons has done, they have asked us so many times, please put in this register of interests in the Cayman Islands. And we have gone about and we have said, we had made so many excuses about it. And we have said, oh, well, when it becomes an international thing, a universal thing, then we will comply and so forth. And they have been very patient with us. But what has happened now is that they have given us an ultimatum now. They have said, you have to have this in by the end of 2020. And if you do not have it in by the end of 2020, we are going to use our power. And we are going to bring an order in council to change the law in Cayman, to impose the law in Cayman that you have to do this. Now, there has been a lot of talk, but I just want to face your audience to know what's the reality of this whole situation. People believe in this country that we are equal to the people in the United Kingdom. We are constitutionally and legally not equal to them. We are a colony. They control us politically, and as I have showed you, and constitutionally and administratively. It is like we are similar to a servant or a slave master who has a slave, or a servant who has a good servant. And we have taken our shoe shine box and we have shined their shoes, and we have done everything that they ask us to do. We have flied the flag every morning, and we have taken the flag down every evening. We have done everything. And he promised us that he's going to treat us really right, and he's not going to sell us down to the next plantation, or he's not going to fire us from the job. And lo and behold, when we come the next day, they have a person now who flies the flag because he's now security, and they say, well, it's because you do not have the skill and the expertise to do this. in the plantation situation, the master says, well, I ran into some difficulties, not being able to pay my bills and stuff and things like that, and I had to sell you down to the plantation to the next plantation, and you become very upset because you thought that you had a relationship with them, and you thought that the relationship was based on mutual respect and mutual and the fact that you did everything that you want and like, and that you like you. And but I want to say, when it comes to the British, to the interest of the British, and our Constitution says that when it comes to their interest is first and paramount. That's what it says. And people who do not understand that are really naive, or do not understand the Constitution, what it says.
Okay, we're going to take a commercial break. Folks, don't change that dial. Please stay tuned. The conversation will continue with MLA Mr. Christopher Saunders and Dr. Steve McPhail. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, MLA Mr. Christopher Saunders, Dr. Steve McPhail. I'm going to throw the mic back over to Dr. McPhail now.
Yes.
And I use this terminology, throw the mic. And someone said to me the other day, "Oh, see, what in the world happens in that studio? You talking about throwing the mic back over to to someone else?" I said, what it means is just that I'm going to give them the
you can actually throw it over.
So it's not like drop the mic,
Yeah. Oh no.
Okay.
Doc.
You remember what I said about the executive power rests in Her Majesty the Queen and is exercised through the governor and the cabinet?
Yes.
Well, look at Section 81 of the Constitution and see what it says. It says the heading of that section, the governor's reserve power. And it says, if the governor considers that the enactment of legislation is necessary or desirable with respect to or in the interest of any matter for which he or she is responsible under Section 55, but after consultation with the Premier, it appears to the governor that the cabinet is unwilling to support the introduction into the Legislative Assembly of a bill for the purpose of that or that the Assembly is unlikely to pass a bill introduced into it for the purpose, the governor may, with the prior approval of the Secretary of State, cause a bill for the support to be published in, it says, in the government notice, and may, notwithstanding that the bill has not been passed by the Assembly, assent to it on behalf of Her Majesty. But the bill shall be so published for at least 21 days prior to assent, unless the governor certifies by writing under his or her hand that the matter is too urgent to permit such delay at the giving of assent, and to inform the Secretary of State.
Now, then, Doc, my question would be,
Yes.
if that order in council were to come,
Yes.
then Section 81 would kick in as well in terms of putting it through our local legislature here?
If it comes and our legislature do not abide by it,
Yes.
the governor can do it himself by making the bill himself and assent it to it himself, and it would become law in Cayman.
Now, and let's make a distinction between other territories. Does this have anything to do with the fact that in some other overseas territories, the governor actually has responsibility for finances, financial affairs, but here he doesn't? We have a Ministry of Finance.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. That's the difference, OC.
Yeah, thank you.
You're
very
a
much
good
for that.
scholar.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're a good-
I do a lot of reading.
You're a good scholar.
Let's go to the phone lines. We have one caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, I'd like to ask Dr. Steve a question.
Sure.
He seems to know a lot about the Constitution and the history. Dr. Steve, morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
I want to ask you a question, sir, and I want you to be really honest with me.
Yes, sir.
You think that we as overseas territory are being pressured to become independent by all these regulations and rule by England?
No, sir. No, sir.
Pressure for independence.
It has nothing to do with independence. It has to do with the law in which governs us, and the fact that they are the administrators of us. People do not understand what that means. They are the administrating powers. It has nothing to do with pressuring us to go into independence.
Okay.
But that is
thank
something
you,
that we should be thinking about.
Exactly.
Because I can tell you this.
Well, you sound like you're. I listened to you over the years, and you sound like you're a man who ready to take the whip from over your back.
That's what I was going to say to you, sir. Because if a slave master is beating you all the time, you have two options: kill me, and let me be free of you,
Yes, sir.
or I want to be free of him.
All right, sir.
That's my position. That's my philosophy.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Back to you, Doc.
So, what's happening now is that we should be using the powers that the Constitution gives us under Section 55, and to start thinking about what we are going to do, and to have plans in place instead of reacting when something happened to us. I think in Section 55 it says special responsibilities of the governor. It says the governor shall be responsible for the order, for the conduct subject to this Constitution and any other law of any business of the government with respect to the following matters: defense, external affairs, subject to Section 3 and 4, internal security, and the appointment including promotion and civil service and so forth. But it goes on to say, the governor acting after consultation with the premier may assign or delegate to any member of the cabinet by instrument in writing and in such terms and conditions as he or she may impose responsibility for the conduct on behalf of the governor of any business in the Legislative Assembly with respect to any of the matters listed in subsection 1, all the matters that the governor has. What we should have been doing from this came in 2009 is to go to the governor and say, we want to be responsible for these things that you have been that you are responsible for under the Constitution. What that would have done, that would have put us in a place to have experience, to be able to run our country internally, to prepare ourselves for something like this when it happens. That we could say, I'm sorry, we don't like this, we're not going to fight you with this, we are going to talk about going our own way, and we would like you to set the date for when we can do that. Now, we do not have the experience to do that. I heard you on the radio several days ago, Mr. For the Record, saying that you would come out of retirement if that would happen. Well, Mr. For the Record, we should have been thinking about that for years and years and years. Now we're only reacting to what has happened to us. So, the position that we have to be in now, we have to be all in this boat together if we are going to fight this thing. And I don't mean together with just the Caymanian people using their money to fight this thing. Because I didn't see anywhere since this whole thing blew up in our face that the private sector who's sucking up all the money, who's making all the millions and millions and millions, where one guy can buy a car for $300,000 and $400,000. I don't see them putting in any money into it. I don't hear them saying to the government, to the prime minister, we are going to put in $15 million or $50 million to fight this thing. I don't hear them doing that. But all of a sudden now it's a Caymanian thing. All of a sudden now, remind us it's a Caymanian thing now. But when they were sharing the money up in the boardroom and putting the money in the bank and send it to other jurisdictions, we were not involved. They say that we were stupid and that we didn't have any experience and we didn't understand these complicated things. But now they want us all to fight together. Well, I would like them to put their money where their mouth is now and help the Caymanian people now to fight this incident.
Right. One of our listeners has written and said, many know when to rise to an occasion, but very few know when to sit down. And that is attributed to Sir Winston Churchill. Well, we need to sit down now. And I think that the the resolve of the government, the resolve of the opposition, and the resolve of the Cayman Islands, people of the Cayman Islands, must be demonstrated in this instance, because, like I've said before, it goes beyond just the financial services.
Yes,
it has to do with our existence.
Yes.
We have to make a decision in terms of where do we want to go from here. I cannot believe that in 1976, and Chris, you're the accountant, you know the figures, between 1976 and 2008, how many years that is. I wrote my a paper.
That's 42.
That's 42.
42 years.
42 years ago, I wrote a paper on the right of self-determination in small territories and expressed my hope that one day we here in the Cayman Islands would be in that position. And I believe that I'm going to probably end up going 6 feet under, and it still is not going to happen. When are we as a people are going to wake up and realize that financial success for a few does not mean that the majority must sit and be subservient to a quote-unquote superior nation or generation?
Exactly.
When are we going to realize that? Let's take a commercial break. When we come back, for the record, we'll continue. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, MLA Mr. Christopher Saunders and Dr. Steve Macfield. We have two callers, so we're going to the phone lines. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Yes, good morning, good morning. Mr. Maxfield, it's good to have you back on the radio.
Thank you, ma'am.
Seeing Chris and Mr. Maxfield, I hear and I feel a cry in my country. Mr. Maxfield, I beg of you to continue to give us knowledge and understanding of this island. If it takes you to walk the streets to give knowledge to our people, I am 100% behind you. I will personally drive and stand alongside you. Please continue to give us knowledge. Because as Mr. Borden said one time, hey, Borden, if you think that education is expensive, try ignorance. I feel a cry in my island this morning. Just listen to you. I thank you so much. You all have a good one.
Thank
you
ma'am.
very much, caller. Thank you very much. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm very well. I sit here and I constantly listen to Mr. Macfield, Dr. Macfield on the radio. And it is so sad to know that a man of his wealth of knowledge has been bypassed for decades. They come here from Timbuktu and they get QC. But I guess the problem with Mr. Macfield is his color and where he's from. Mm-hmm. It is so sad to know that a man who is so learned in these islands and one of the few who knows history and constitution like he does has not been recognized. Yeah, a doctorate degree, and I thank those that were responsible for that. But this man should have been QC long time ago. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But because he is Caymanian and he's got a dark complexion and his time in this country...
And speaks
his mind, yes.
And speaks his mind.
It is ridiculous to see how we are treated in our country. And forget about those people like me who comes on the radio. Oh, man, we got problems in life, because we come on the radio and we speak out and we say what is true. They don't want to hear what the truth is. Well, I had come off the radio for some time, but they have to deal with me now in its entirety because I ain't staying shut no more. It is time that we stand up in this country and be what we are, Caymanians. If we leave here, where in the hell are we going to go? We have nowhere to go, gentlemen. We have nowhere to go. We can't get work in our own country, so where do we go? Do we go and get a Jamaica passport or a Filipino passport? It is sad what has happened in this country. But I have warned before. I told people years ago, as I left RCIPS, that crime was going to become rampant. They didn't take heed then, but we are now facing it. I warned that there's going to be a serious uprising in this country, if something is not done to protect the Caymanians and recognize the Caymanians. Gentlemen, take care and have a good day.
Thank you very much, caller.
Thank you, caller.
I believe that we have the leader of the opposition on the line as well.
Yes.
Let's go to the phone lines. Good morning, Mr. Miller. Welcome to For the Record, sir.
Morning, Mr. O.C., and morning to Dr. Markfield, and morning to Chris.
Good morning,
Morning.
sir. Good morning, Mr. Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable D. Ezra Miller. It's nice to hear you on the radio again.
As you
It's nice.
know,
It's nice for me to hear you. It's nice.
Hear him on the other end.
Yeah, on the end,
it's
yes.
good to hear you, too.
Yes,
It's
yes.
good to hear you. But, as we reached out very early after this thing happened and gave a commitment to the government that we were prepared to fight and join him in the battle for our financial industry.
Yes.
Part of what he informed us when me and Mr. Chris met with him was that he was employing two eminent lawyers in the UK to look at the constitutionality of what the UK House of Commons had done. And I want to say that having listened, well, I've always known this, but I'm sure the public would support me, having listened to Dr. Markfield this morning, to make a recommendation to the Honorable Premier that he enjoin Dr. Markfield in that representation as a local constitutional expert, so that we can make sure that the flavor of Cayman and the importance of Cayman is of permanence in any discussion about the constitutionality of what was done. So I would be making that recommendation to the Premier in writing.
Thank
Sounds
you.
good.
Thank
Yes.
you, sir.
Yes,
Thank you,
that's
sir.
good. Excellent
Because
idea.
Mr. Leader of the Opposition, are you still there?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
The member of Parliament moving that bill said that he knew that there was going to. He said he used the word acute.
Uh-huh.
Yes, there were going to be acute consequences or something like that. He said.
Yes.
Yeah, consequences in Cayman Islands and I guess other overseas territories. What will happen if we lose a large part of our financial industry? Is that we are going to lose the balance of the middle class Caymanian middle class that we have,
Of course.
and then we're going to have a lower class on top of another lower class, and that.
But just to get back to my concerns about the Constitution, as you know, Dr. McField, people like yourself, in particular me, have been advocating for the last 25 years that Caymanians should determine its own destiny.
That's right.
And that we should, a long time ago, I've advocated this from the time we got the Step 2 Constitution. We should have been advancing incrementally every 5 years towards greater internal self-government,
Yes.
and to eventually to independence.
Yes.
And we should set that date.
Yes.
My great fear is coming, has been increased, because all we need now is for some flamboyant politician to come forward and use this incident to take us into independence in a short period of time, and we are not ready.
Yes, sir. And you know what?
We need to sit down and plan our exit from the UK over the next 15 to 20 years.
Yes. You know what?
And do it gradually so we can bring our people along,
Yes.
and we can develop our institutions to
Yes.
facilitate it properly.
Yes.
Because the British government has a good history of messing up people's economy, particular Caribbean countries, destroying their civil service, and we know how ours has been deteriorating over the last several years, and destroying your economy, and then encouraging you to take independence with a bad civil service, an incompetent civil service, and a bad economy, and then making fun of you and see, I told you couldn't run this little country.
Yes.
We need to avoid that by carefully planning our own exit.
Yes. Mr. Miller, this reminds me of the reaction that happened in 1962 after the Caribbean Federation broke up. You remember?
Absolutely.
They didn't.
Yeah.
You remember they didn't have independence on their minds then, and when the crisis happened, they had to do something to be able to be in a to stand up and be on an equal footing. We don't want to be in a similar situation that just drives us into reacting, and then we lose everything that we have in the end.
No, we don't have to be looking for the kind of severance for independence that, that took place in the 60s.
Yes.
In this modern day, we should be looking for greater autonomy
Yes.
with prescribed interdependence
Yes.
that we paid him for,
Precisely.
so that we can
Yes.
determine whether we get that or not.
Yes.
Not something that is gratis and at
Yes.
their leisure.
Yes. And what I would suggest to you, Mr. Miller, too, is something that I was instrumental in doing when they sent me out into the world to represent Cayman Islands and in overseas countries and territories, forums and meetings. And they were all in discussion after the meetings when they didn't get what they wanted, when some territories were getting 100 million euros for fight invasive species and things like that. And when we asked them for money to fight invasive species in Cayman Islands, they told me that we couldn't get it because we had the highest GDP. And then there's a gentleman now I see in the newspaper reading the Guardian and the Times and all that kind of stuff, named Mr. Wheatley. Well, he was a young man then, and he and I sat down one evening after a meeting with the European Union, and we decided, why are we all have our own agenda, our own separate agenda? Why don't we all get together as a unit? And we decided, and we saw out of that meeting, we were able to convince the other territories to form together to form something called the Caribbean Overseas Countries and Territories Association. That was formed down in Aruba. I think it was 2010 that was formed down there. So we already have a precedent for that. What we need now is to form a Caribbean Overseas Countries and Territories Association and try to fight this thing together as a people from the Caribbean. And not only us going and hiring lawyers in England and spending a lot of money by ourselves, because they're going to say, well, you're just from Cayman Islands. The other people are not concerned. We need to do that. We need and what we need to do, Mr. Miller, we need to send a delegation to nearly every country that we can afford to go. Get on the flight. Go to CNN. Go everywhere. Go to every country and let them know what they're doing to us. Go to the UN.
Yeah, this isn't
Because the Brits don't like that. They don't like being embarrassed. They don't like being put on a public stage.
Go to the UN.
We are unique.
And have an audience there.
We are uniquely positioned to do something about that
And
that Cayman is the leading of the Caribbean Overseas Territories right now.
And Mr. Miller?
Premier sits in the chair.
And Mr. Miller, when I was a law student, I went to school at Vancouver City College with two Indians. Their parents, you probably knew the movie called Little Big Man. Mm-hmm. There was a man called Chief Dan George, Indian. Well, his tribe owned the city of West Vancouver. They get royalty from the city paying them taxes. And he has a son called Dan, young Dan. When I got into law school, he couldn't get into law school because he couldn't pass the LSAT because it's a cultural test. I didn't say a thing about it. Didn't say a thing about it to anyone. But that year, when they had the graduation, I got a picket. And I went up and I picketed the graduation up at University of British Columbia. The only person. And when I went in my sign to the big graduation, within half an hour, every camera, every TV station in BC was on me. Why are you doing this, son? And I said, because it's the law school discriminated against Native people. And I went viral all over Canada. I became, and the next year, not only Dan, but 3 other Indians got into law school. We need to do the same thing. When I came to London in 1974, I saw the people from the Chagos Island picketing every day in front of 10 Downing Street. If someone can pay my passage and find me a place to live, I would go there and picket too.
All right.
Okay.
Well, let the show continue. Sorry for
Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling in.
Thanks for calling in. We have one caller. We're going to ask that caller to hold on. We're going to take a commercial break. When we return, we will take that caller. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. Unfortunately, we're on the last leg of our show this morning. We have one caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hi, good morning, OC.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Morning, T.
Good morning, T.
Good morning, Chris. Yeah, so I'm only just getting the last bit of what transpired. Somebody just whispered and said, T, are you listening? I wasn't listening because I'm just preparing my kids to do their O-level, one of their O-levels. But here, I'm not quite sure what has transpired, but these are some preliminary thoughts. I shared on another show that things will settle down. My question is, what will happen after this other threat that once we have survived this, yet another threat? Where do we go from here? Are we going to have a organized strategic plan about what happens in the event that if we are successful with developing a plan that addresses this successfully, and as Steve rightly said, we don't do it on our own, we do it with all the people that share the same issues, that share our same issues, and we have some kind of organized process. So that's one limb. How do we manage that? And if we're successful, where do we go with that limb where the economy is concerned? But more importantly, what are we going to do about colonial decolonization or constitutional decolonization? Because as Ezard and Steve and others have been talking about forever and a day, what's going to happen when when we're not in a position where we're going to have an opportunity or 2 years, for example, to address the concerns? Because as you can see, the United Kingdom is not really concerned about any contingent liability that they may have. The order is not coming across as something where there's a symbiotic relationship and one that's based on respect. That whole idea of trust, this was now lost. They have just shown us exactly where they are and how they view us. Maya Angelou always say, when somebody tells you what they think about you, believe them because they know. So what are our plans? What are our individual plans in Cayman to address these concerns where we're concerned? Because we now have to think about our future. We should have been thinking about it all along, but here we are again. What are we going to do? Is it just going to be pure chat, or are we going to really sit down and forge a future for our children and our grandchildren where we extricate ourselves from this situation where we are dependent on folks who don't really have our interests at heart? So that's really one of the concerns, the major concern that I have in terms of what are we going to do afterwards? Are we going to sit back? Is it going to be business as usual? Or are we going to be proactive and start to develop and forge in a future for our own path? And we don't even have to like each other to do that, It's just really about respect and looking at what we all share in common. And that's really all I wanted to share.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank you very much, Mr. T. I'm told that the switchboard is all lit up, so let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning, Mr. O.C.
Morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, and good morning, Dr. Steve. Good morning, Mr. Sanders.
Good morning, sir.
Well, I'm calling this morning because I feel happy to listen to the radio. And I want to tell my brother, Marfield, I got your back.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever happened, don't worry. I'll be behind you 100%.
Thank you.
That's all I got to say. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Very, very, very well, and very interesting.
Got your text earlier.
Good. Mr. O.C., thank you for that. It's so good to listen to Mr. Steve because he brings into history, and when you don't study history, then you don't understand what's happening, and you don't understand why we are where we are. And it's not very complicated, but in the way the United Kingdom has not severed its ties, but loosened its ties on the colonies. If you look at the way that they treated the white colonies, which was Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Newfoundland, and surprising, you might think it might not be a white colony, but they considered South Africa would always be controlled by white people.
Mm-hmm.
And they also considered Bermuda would always be controlled by white people. So the constitution that those, or the relationship that was developed with those territories is totally different than all of the rest. And when the United Kingdom was drafting after the League of Nations fell out in 1944, they drafted the UN Charter 73E, which deals with self-determination. And unfortunately, here in Cayman, although Mr. Steve has been and other people have been to the UN, I've been there too, to investigate and find out about this decolonization committee, which is a pariah name in some respects, and people don't understand really what it is. It is really a group of people that work together to see the implementation of 73E of the United Nations. And the United Kingdom every year goes and reports to them that the Cayman Islands is in a state of self-determination, and therefore the Cayman Islands should not be on the list of nations that's considered that are under an administering power. But we know that that is a lie. But they're allowed to go there year after year. Mr. Steve has been there. He can comment after I hang up. He knows what I'm saying. And they're allowed to go there year after year because we do not send a representative every year. We do not really contribute to the report that goes in to say the state in the Cayman Islands. And when we had an opportunity to have one of their regional meetings here in the Cayman Islands, our government leader of the day refused to have them come.
And that was through encouragement by the UK. Yes. I can tell you that because I was there.
No, I'm not saying I fully agree.
The UK encouraged us not.
Yes. I happen to know a few people up at the UN because that is part of their the UK's position is to keep us ignorant and hungry. That's the way that they rule. And they want us in a state of constant hunger and needing their aid. And when you don't need them for food and shelter, and you're not hungry, then they don't have as much sway over you. But
Carl, I'm going to ask you to abbreviate because we only have about 4 minutes, and I think we still have several callers queued up.
Okay, I'm just saying, sir, that Mr. Steve, next time you're on, expand more as to the rights that we have under the UN, the rights for individuals to go to the UN.
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you very much. Right. Thank you. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Morning, gents. It's Johan.
Morning, sir.
Morning, you.
Just want to throw a quick log onto the fire. The duplicitousness of the UK with regards to how it's managing or dealing with the British overseas territories blows one's mind. But especially when you consider the fact that for 50-odd years, the Cayman Islands has done everything in its powers to jump through every hoop. If you look at the citation given to our national hero and our first knight for services to the financial services industry here in the Cayman Islands, and then you examine all of the other individual royal gongs and honors that have been bestowed on industry participants, surely the UK must have thought we were doing something bad then. Otherwise, or thought it was acceptable, the standards of our financial services industry. Otherwise, why would they allow and bestow such royal honors to persons and Caymanians who have played key roles in the development of our financial services industry? When you think back to the fact that you have individuals or a person who received a knighthood at a time when Cayman did not have the number of tax treaty agreements, AML sort of provisions, and international standards that make us now world-renowned. Yet, after doing all of that, there's suddenly a problem with the Cayman Islands financial services industry, having been recognized by same said British government that we have done a fantastic job and bestowed multiple honors on multiple people in industry. So just think about that.
Good point.
The hypocrisy involved in all of that. Have a good day, Dan.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. One of our listeners has written and said the damage is already done. England, they have lit the torch. Even if this bill/law does not materialize, fear is running through the investors' minds. They believe England would still reach their goal of destroying our rich economy. And that is that person's observation. I must say that Mr. Moxham talked about the awards and stuff like that. And believe it or not, I said to my friends down in Rock Hole, that I'm waiting for the opportune time to return my MBA to the UK.
Yeah, MBE.
MBE, sorry, yeah, MBA. I call it. I sound like I have an MBA already. MBA, my MBE to the UK, and this may be the opportune time to do it, depending on how this pans out, because that MBE says I'm a member of the British Empire. So you know what, people, I'm a part of those that are suppressing you. I can't be a part of them. I'm sorry, I cannot be a part of them. So at some point in time, at a convenient point in time, I will take that little box with that medal in it, wrap it, write a nice note to the governor and return it to them. And I won't make any fanfare about it, but it will be done, because it cannot remain on my conscience that I am a member of the British Empire, and here I am putting pressure on my people. Gentlemen, I give you all the mic for closing comments.
Yes. Yeah, well, I just want to briefly thank Dr. Steve for coming this morning. As I said before, his contribution is always valuable. And for us to understand where we are and where we're going, we need to understand where we're coming from. And Dr. Steve has been one of those that have been uniquely and eminently qualified to put it in that perspective. So I just want to thank him for coming in, and all the callers for calling in. And Dr. Steve, I'll give you the last say.
Yes.
Well, I wrote up a article many years ago. I'm going to try to find it now. We're all in this boat together, and no one's paddle is better than the other one's. We're all in this boat together, and if we don't row this boat together in calm waters, out of the uncalm waters that we have now, out of the treacherous waters and the rocks that they're going to put us on, we are going to lose everything. We're going to lose our middle class. We're going to lose our earning class. We're going to lose everything. It's going to be, what's going to happen here is going to be impose one poor, another poor class on top of another poor class, and then that is going to be a catalyst for the upheaval that people talk about that will happen here. We cannot afford that right now. We cannot afford that anyway. We cannot afford that now. I would suggest that we ask the private financial sector to put money into to fight this thing and to stand together. And what we should do is our premier should invite a meeting of all the Caribbean overseas countries to Cayman, so that we can talk to them. We can talk to them
and strategize.
We
can't go about this individually. It has to be a concerted effort.
A concerted effort.
Yes.
And I would leave it like that. And I would hope that he's listening to us, and he could do that, and you could do that sooner than later, because we need to know where we're going, because time flies. It's already May. 2020 is not going to take long to come.
It won't take long.
And we need to do that right away.
Some of these actions are required by 2019.
Yes,
as well.
Thank you.
Okay. I know that a lot of us believe that if we don't talk about something, that it goes away. It doesn't go away.
And I would like to thank Chris again for allowing me to come on to his show.
Thank you for coming. Thanks for coming on.
It's original crew. I'm sorry, this is original crew. I was used to this on a Friday, long before elections.
I really appreciate that, Chris, and I want to thank you for that.
I'm really grateful for you to come into Doc, more than you realize.
Yeah. So there are those who believe that not talking about something makes it go away. It doesn't go away. It stays there with you. For those of you who are fearful about talking about independence, talking about it doesn't mean going independent. But we need to discuss it. People need to understand what the ramifications are, what the pros and cons are for the Cayman Islands. At the end of the day, that same constitution that Dr. Macfield talked about and the British West Indies Act, the UK has said that if any overseas territory, any country that is under their control wants to go independence, the will of the people has to be identified, has to be displayed in that. We can only display that, I believe, through two functions. One, an election platform that runs on the basis that we want independence. And if that party or that group that establishes that platform wins the government, then they can take us there, or by a referendum.
Yes.
But you can't go to a referendum if you don't know what you're talking about or what you're voting on.
Yes.
You can't vote in an election for a party that is advocating for constitutional change that takes us to independence if you don't know what it's all about. And that is what we are committed here to doing in terms of educating you to that. It may be a hard subject for you, but you need to understand it. The old days of the 60s and the 70s, when independence was a bad word, we need to get rid of that, because there are a lot more challenges that are coming our way in terms of human beings and how we treat them, issues in relation to whether or not marriage is, should remain between one man and one woman or otherwise. Those are all the hard issues that we're going to have to discuss as well. And one of those need to be our future. Where do we go from here? Do we need another generation to come up and to live under the subjugation of the United Kingdom, a colonial power? We asked ourselves that question. Folks, I want to thank you for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension, For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who is less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want or even those who crave. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. Join Sterling Dwayne Banks at 12 noon for talk today. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful, still successful, and true determination will continue to be successful Cayman Islands.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.